Yeah, we're live. 7:04. You guys know what that means. It's time to get going. Time to make stuff happen. So today we're going to talk about the video. First of all, the video that I posted today was a 5-liter Mustang. We went through step by step on the modifications, which is cool. This is what was one of my favorite 5-liter test series because I tested a lot of stuff and everything went pretty smoothly. Everything went fairly well. There was lots of prep beforehand and getting the motor ready and stuff, so that, for instance, that it had pistons that would accept, had valve release that would accept camshafts and stuff. And we had from a previous test from the cylinder head test, we had the stock heads that already had valve springs on them, so we could run the cam upgrade with the stock spring, which is important because when we're making these modifications to any of these motors, the order that you make the modifications in is very, very important. And we see this in a couple of situations and a couple of instances on this particular test. So we ran the 302. We ran it with a stock intake manifold, the stock HO upper and lower intake manifold. We even ran it with stock exhaust manifolds before we put the headers on. But at each step, each thing that you change, for instance, the headers were worth 10 or 11 horsepower. They're worth good power through the whole curve. And we see that with long tube headers because they have a scavenging effect. So they're not just about flow, they're about scavenging. And so we see, based on the primary length of the header and the design of the header, it adds power down low too. But the amount of gain that you get is going to change with other modifications that you have to the motor. So depending on your cam timing, because a lot of the scavenging effect is tied to valve events. So the benefits of the headers can change, whether it's a bone stock motor, whether it's a cammed motor, whether it's a cam heads intake motor. So if we were to do that header test after the motor has been made into a stroker and has more camshaft and free flowing heads and lots of intake manifold, we would see that the headers are worth more. Same thing with every one of the modifications. So we tested the intake manifold. So we put a GT40 intake manifold in place of the stock intake manifold. Again, if we had other things, if we already had a ported head, we already had cams, we already had headers, and the intake manifold was the last thing that we tested, you'd see much greater gains than we saw just by, on a mild combination, going from the HO upper and lower intake manifold to the GT40. The GT40 was worth power, and we saw that, but it would have been worth more had we done it after we'd done a lot of other mods. The other area where we see this is with the camshaft. We ran the camshaft with the stock heads. Well, the camshaft was worth a pretty good bit of power. You can take a look at the video and see. But the camshaft alone by itself would be worth even more power if this thing already had a good intake manifold and a good set of cylinder heads, and the camshaft was the thing now that was holding it back. And then we solved that problem by, putting a good camshaft in this case, an Extreme Energy 274 cam. We put that cam in, and all of a sudden we get bigger gains. So the question that I get all the time, how much is a cam worth? How much are intake manifolds worth? How much are cylinder heads worth? The answer is always it depends. It depends on what order we're testing them in, what the test motor is, all of that stuff. So, but I did like the sequence of events that we did in this test. And I also liked it as a comparison when I did this video, as a comparison to, well, what would happen if we just added boost? Normally, I don't recommend running a turbo on just a bone stock motor. I think it's almost always better to do some kind of modification. In case of an LS, we put a camshaft in it, cam and springs in it. Now you're going to have to put lifters and fuel pumps in because you have to have the fuel to be able to supply the power level. But in the case of the LS, you put a camshaft in, you might see a camshaft at the same boost level could be worth 120, 30, 40, 50 horsepower. So it's hard to ignore that kind of power gain with a simple cam swap. So it's definitely worthwhile. Same thing with this 5-liter is that if you run a bone stock motor and then run boost on it, you can make pretty good power. You can make even better power if you have other modifications, like we talked about, the camshaft, the intake manifold, cylinder heads. But if you can't afford both of them, and that's what this video is all about, which one should you choose? Which one is better? And there's no way to answer better because better is subjective. There's not an absolute there. What I showed is in terms of power, if you were to buy heads, cam, and intake, which is certainly enough money in this case to purchase the alternative, which would be a single turbo setup for a 5-liter, which is fairly easy to do, the turbo would ultimately make more power. I mean, you could turn the boost up on a 5-liter, even with the stock heads and stock cam and stock intake manifold. You could turn the boost up on that and always get more power than the NA combination makes. Because let's face it, on a typical 302, you put heads, cam, and intake manifold, even if your price is no object and you're very selective about the things that you do, the available piston to valve clearance with a 302, the heads that are available for a 302, and the intake manifolds that are available for a 302, you're looking at somewhere near 400 horsepower. You might be able to get 425, or you might be able to get 375 or something like, but it's going to be right in that range. That sort of power level with a turbo starting off at, let's call it 250 or something with the stock setup, it's not very hard to get to 400 horsepower or even more than that. As we showed in the video, it showed it's just a multiplier. So you could do it on, you can do it on fairly low boost. And the thing that's nice about it is once you get your gains from the NA power output, if you did heads, cam, and intake manifold, that's what it's going to make. Well, a turbo is not like that. If you have a 600 horsepower turbo, you might be able to make 600 horsepower, take a lot of boost, and you might be, pressing the other stock components. Certainly, head gaskets and head studs and things like that. And you would want to have ring gap in it. And as I mentioned in the video, the way to go about this is, the best thing is to have all of it, to have heads, cam, and intake and the turbo. And then there's no limit to how much power you can make. If you have a 400 or 425 horsepower NA motor and you start multiplying that out with a boost, you get to 1,000 horsepower with not an unrealistic amount of boost. So you could make enough money or enough power to just basically destroy a 5-liter. I think we need to do a big bang on that to verify it, but I'm pretty sure. But you can get there. Ultimately, that's great. If you have that kind of money or wherewithal, that's fantastic. It's more power to you. If you have only enough money to do one or the other, I think, and I've been a big fan of going the other way with the heads, cam, and intake, but I think I would ultimately look at the turbo setup. You might be able to get blower stuff for that, like centrifugal, like a Vortec or those kinds of things. And maybe there's some low dollar ones that you could buy that would make that work. But a turbo, we know that you could buy a turbo and an intercooler. You get both of those for $500. And then it's tubing and making the exhaust work and that kind of stuff. Regardless of which way you went, you're going to need injectors because the stock injectors are not going to get you there. So whether you buy injectors that will support 400 horsepower or 600 or 700 horsepower, the price is going to be probably the same. You get the deck of 80s, you're set, and then you can make that kind of power. You need a fuel pump. You're going to need a fuel pump anyway. You can't run a stock fuel pump. So those two things you're going to have, and you're going to have to have tuning for whether you went with the heads, cam, and intake or whether you went with a turbo. So if you select we put a GT45 turbo or something like that on a stock 5-liter, it will make pretty good power. The third option, not just either one of those, the absolutes, we have to pick the turbo and keep our stock motor. And then we have to pick a heads, cam, and intake manifold, or you go, the level up here is, okay, we have heads, cam, and intake and a turbo. We get whatever we want. We'll get a dart block. We'll get forged internals. The sky's the limit on price. We can do whatever we want. That's all fantastic. I don't live up there. The other option is to not go all out and get the most expensive airflow research set of heads and the biggest camshaft you can put in there and the best intake manifold, but get something else. You go to the wrecking yard and get GT40 intake manifold and cylinder heads, from the Ford Explorer. That's going to be pretty inexpensive. In fact, the whole motor would be pretty inexpensive still. And that's a much better starting point, even though it's not rated at a whole bunch more power. It has a whole bunch more potential than a factory 5-liter does. The heads are not good. The intake manifold, definitely not good. Camshaft's actually pretty good. But if you're going to put another camshaft in it, you could either put a stock HO camshaft in it, in your hybrid motor, or you can find a used one. There's always people selling used, look on eBay and stuff. There's always people selling used B3, EX, whatever camshafts. And you can usually find one of those fairly inexpensively. So you could do it. You could still do mods on the cheap. They wouldn't be ideal ones. They wouldn't be a good set of CNC ported aluminum heads, but they would be better than an E7 head. You could also port either one of those, your E7 head or your GT40 head, and you could get good gains. And so you could make more than reasonable power with that for more than reasonable money. So, that's another option. There isn't, I present it in the video as the absolutes. Well, pick this one or pick this one. What would you do? Maybe I don't want to pick either one of those. Maybe I want something else, something in between. And that's why we always talk about this stuff. And that's kind of what the live feed is all about. So let me know what you guys thought. Do you go turbo? And the thing is that, as you know, as always, this video, although it was about a 5-liter Mustang engine, carries over to everything. And in some instances, it makes even more sense because we don't have all the options. If you pick a 1UZ Toyota engine, where are all the CNC aftermarket heads? Where are all the camshaft options? Where are the multitude of intake options? It might not be there. So boost is really the thing that you're probably going to do anyway. And then those other things get even more prohibitively expensive because there's not 20 different intake manifolds available for it. There's not 50 or 60 or 1,000 different camshafts for it. There's not 20 or 30 different sets of aftermarket cylinder heads available for it. So in some instances, that's really going to kind of be the play because adding boost to it, it's going to make good power. And in that case, on the Toyota, it's already making reasonable like NA power anyway. So, you could make even more once you add boost. I've seen Rob Dom's last video. He found a guy that made a 12 rotor motor. I did see that. I didn't know it was 12. I knew it was a whole bunch of them. That's pretty gangster though. Can you do some testing on the E303 cam? I have. I just compared that versus the Summit cam. That video's up. Thank you, man. Needs a poll. I do heads cam intake before boost. Yeah, if you could do all of it, that's fantastic. Brakes, you're doing that on your 351, small cam heads, turbo. I don't think if you have small cam heads and boost, you probably won't need the stroker for that. It's set up like 3-4 rotors. That's cool. So that's going to be that's a big block rotary, so it should make lots of torque then. What's your guess on the 351 on the Big Bang motor? Well, we know it's going to go over 1,000, right? Bob, that's right. And somebody mentioned that in the comments, and they were kind of rude about it. But the drivability would certainly be better with a turbo engine with a stock cam and stuff. And that's the nice thing about the cam is that we are always amazed running stuff on the engine dyno because a lot of times we forget. Most of the things we run on there are like plop, 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 and they're loud and they're open headered and they're all that thing. But then you get a motor in there, especially one that when you put exhaust on. I like running mufflers on stuff. I don't like the loud noise. I'm over that. So I like running mufflers on stuff. But when you run mufflers on stuff, if you run headers and long tubes, but if you run stock exhaust manifolds and mufflers, and then you run something with a stock cam in it, you almost forget, especially when it's idling at like 600 RPM or whatever. It's not making any noise at all. You forget that it's even on. You're like, oh, and it has 22 inches of idle vacuum. You're like, yeah, that's right. This is what stock motors do. It's kind of nice. Is it worth to put boost through E7 heads? Yeah, guys have run turbos on E7 heads a lot. It's way better to have aluminum heads. So if you can get skip whites or those kinds of things, and they're cheap, or the AFR Enforcer heads or whatever, it's going to be much better. That's right, Jim. If you want 1,000 horsepower, buy 1,000 horsepower turbo. I think a ZF5 speed manual trans with an extra long rat style shifter. There you go. For your motorhome. Marvin, so you want to get the book? I'm going to go ahead and put my email address down here. You can send me an email. Let's see. There we go. Yeah, so just send me an email. So if anybody's looking for, Marvin is getting a signed book. I need to see which one you want. I don't have all of them. I have Hemi. I have B series. I have K series. I have 1 or 2 LS. And I think that's it. Yeah, those are the ones I have the most of. Can't go wrong with boost on my application for power. Can piece together a turbo setup for cheap. Yeah, I did a deal where we could put one together for less than $1,000. Richard, I have a Grand National. I got a front mount intercooler to support my mods, but I hate that the turbo outlet is 1.5 inches and the intercooler pipe is 3 inches. Does a turbo outlet size affect performance? No, well, only in that the turbo itself does. So if the turbo is 1.5 inches out, I don't know what size turbo you have. I don't know if it's a stock one. The intercooler is fine. It doesn't. Your intercooler piping doesn't need to be 3 inch on a Grand National unless are you making lots and lots of power with it? Admiral, the moral of the story: eBay injectors suck, and I've been chasing my tail due to junk injectors. Did you ever have them flowed? Turbo Center, I stretched my main cap bolts and damaged one head bolt thread. Did you over tighten them or something? What? How did you stretch it? Did you stretch it from running it? So that's usually an installation thing, or it can almost only be an installation thing, reusing it or something. I doubt that detonation would stretch the main cap bolt. I haven't seen that happen. Ended up throwing some Ford Blues. Oh, the 24s, yeah. So I'm scrolling back, scrolling. I'm curious about the additional cooling needed. I have a sandwich oil cooler adapter with a few trans cooler stacked, but it still heats up while towing. So the transmission cooler and the oil cooler obviously are a good idea, but if you're talking about engine heat, yeah, you're going to need to do something with either the radiator core. You like dags? I like dags. I had this debate myself 5 years ago with my LS2 booster, heads cam intake, and throttle body. Thought I didn't know any good tuner, so I wanted the heads cam intake. But you need a good tuner for even a heads cam intake. Will need a good tuner to make work. It's just real Richard. There's only one real Richard. AI wouldn't even bother because AI doesn't. Even AI has never heard of me. My L76 has a stroker kit to 402, stage 2 cam, took me to 594, 590. Your 400-inch LS motor is making 594 horsepower and 598 foot-pounds. One of those seems to be off. I've never seen a 408 stroker make torque like that, or 402. So that seems to be odd. Think cathedral port stroker. Where was that 408 that we did? I think it was 625, and then green cams. Here we go. So to give you an idea, 625, and it was 570, 579 or 580 foot-pounds. Usually the torque would not be that close to the horsepower. Richard, I have an LY6 from an '08 Express van. Can you recommend the budget build on that? It's going into a 66 Chevelle. You just got to tell me what kind of power that you want. That motor is already good, just even in stock trim. But a cam and springs is normally what you do. It already has a good intake. It already has good cylinder heads. You can make 540 horsepower with a cam swap, or even more than that. What do we do with the 274? I think it's 543 with a 231 camshaft in that. $799. There we go. This one. Yeah, 541 with just a camshaft in it. And 492 foot-pounds of torque. So just a cam and springs is a cheap way. Wish I knew Oldsmobile stuff like you know Ford or Honda stuff. I wish I knew Oldsmobile stuff like I know Ford and Honda stuff. I don't. I know very little Oldsmobile stuff. I know that 455s they use in boats a lot, and that they also use those motors in Trans Ams. 49 big block. What should I run my ring gap for nitrous? 6.5 thousandths per inch of bore. I will only use the F303. You don't like the other 303s? Richard, we need to see you run it on 50% nitro, 50% methanol. I've never run nitrometh on anything. Thank you, man. You still want to pull? How much can a 2-bolt main? A 2-bolt main what? Ford, Chevy, Dodge? What are you talking about? Downsides of having huge NA cam with boost. The downside is that you don't have lots of boost response, and that it's unnecessary on a turbo application. 99% nitro big bang. I don't think an NA 5.3 with nitromethane is going to make anywhere near what the turbo thing would. Let's see. Charles, I've heard alleged that a person would be further ahead to use a Vortec 4200 over 4800 up to a certain point. If you take a look at the video that I did where I compared those two, you could kind of see, since I already have that video up. For a hardcore street strip 4.6 mod motor on 93. Is this a 2-valve or a 4-valve? But you could certainly run 11 to 1 on those on an NA motor with an aluminum head and with a camshaft in it or camshafts in it. Can you put together a turbo kit for a stock small block Ford AOD? The AOD doesn't have any effect on the turbo kit. Maybe for fitment or something, but 450, 500 horsepower is really easy with a small block Ford. I just bought the intercooler I want for the final stage of the build. It came with the only that size piping. I was going to upgrade the turbo, but mine is a Precision 5757, 18 psi and 94 octane. Okay. 57 millimeter should be able to support more than 500 horsepower. Have a Kenny Bell on a stock 5.0 truck. Is it worth putting a cam in without changing the heads? Yes, you will definitely pick up power. I have a Kenny Bell cam video up where we did the stock cam. Then we did 2 different extreme energy cams on it. and it definitely makes a change in power. And the nice thing is it also brings boost down, which will help with detonation, which the Kenny Bell needs. Richard, do you want to sell a trick flow box intake looking for one for my 351? I don't have one. I don't have a box for a trick flow. I don't have that intake manifold. All of those tests from the trick flow stuff was decades ago. Richard, when you ran the 5.7 Hemi a couple years ago, what size injectors when you got 1200? Was that on the Big Bang motor? I'm thinking that they were. I'd actually have to go back and look. I know that they were at least 80s, and we didn't run it on E85. We ran it on gas. But I think we had to turn the fuel pressure way up on it too. Elevated it. A 62 millimeter turbo will make 500 horsepower, but it's not a single turbo that I probably would use on an LS unless it's on a 4.8. Bob, you want to see a Chevy Turbo 307? I would just like to run a 307. I think that would be awesome. Richard, for a junkyard LS, a 50-50 nitromethane, what compression ratio do we need? I don't know. I think you need to have as much compression as you can for nitromethane. Although I don't know if you want more. See, I don't really know enough about it. I don't know if you would want more volume so that you could put more nitromethane in there to make more power. So I really don't know. Like I said, haven't never run it. Turbo Central. So you've seen 30 pounds, and if it's 30 pounds and not the right timing and or not the right air fuel, and detonation can hurt that stuff. I'm disappointed. No Pontiac books. I'm not enough. I don't have enough knowledge for a Pontiac book. Unfortunately, I'm not the guy that people should be listening to about Pontiacs. I'm just learning Pontiacs. How about going over to the thumbs up symbol under Richard and clicking on it? Nice. Where do injectors make the best power placement along runners? The farther away, the better. They have more time for charge cooling. Does VVT overcome the rec port head deficit on L96 below 4,000 RPM? No, because if you had VVT on a cathedral port head, then it would make more. Guess how many long cleats Crown Vics last at 105? Oh, Crown Vics last. Guess how long they last at 105 miles an hour? Well, they don't last very long crashing into each other, right? Admiral, I'll take a look and see if I might have some 2-valve cams. What is the best heads cam and intake combo in a small block Ford? There's no such thing as best, so I don't know what you mean by that. I don't know what you're trying to do. Do you mean one that makes the best torque, one that makes the best horsepower, one that makes the best average power, one that costs the least, one that's free? I don't know what you mean, but what makes the boost cam different from an NA cam? Nothing, in my opinion. They're the same. You can run an NA cam under boost and you can run a boosted cam NA. So therefore they must actually be the same. Can you run a 70s truck 454 on the dyno? How much torque and horsepower stock heads can handle? I don't know what you mean. How much torque can they handle? I don't know which. Do you mean a 1970 truck one or a 79? Because those would be dramatically different. Are you talking about peanut port heads or are you talking about the standard oval ports? And then which oval port are you talking about? There's a lot of things in there that could make this different. Ported 049 oval port heads that might be on a truck can make a lot of power. Ported ones can make a lot of power, and especially with if you add boost. What cam and turbo size would you recommend? The turbo size would be like an S480 because you just need something that will support 1,000 horsepower and that won't have too much back pressure. So an S480 would be good for something like that. An S485 would also work. The LS3 stuff doesn't matter. There are literally hundreds of cams that will still make that 1,000 horsepower. So the question isn't that. The turbo is going to dictate that. The question now is, what else do you want the cam to do? Do you want to idle good? Do you want to drive nice? Do you want to have good response down low so that the boost comes on? On a 408, that's going to be less of an issue. But I think you should look at something like the hot rod cam from Brian Tooley. Something in that range on a 408 would be plenty responsive and make good power. Wonder how much nitro methanol 5.3 LS would make on boost now. So you want to add boost to it? Cletus has a Crown Vic running at 105 miles an hour on jack stands until the end of the month, or when it blows up, it's on a live stream on a second channel. Oh, cool. Let's see. Running shy of 11 to 1 on my 4.6 with a 274 cam, and it likes 91 with factory timing just fine. Will a more efficient top end be easier on whatever chosen head fasteners for a given build at a given power level? Like, will we running better heads on a motor be less likely to stretch head bolts? No, the stretching the head bolts will be a function of cylinder pressure. So if you're running better heads and making more power, especially if you're making more torque, you have more cylinder pressure. And so it would be more likely. But stretching head bolts, like especially if you're running ARP stuff, that's not a concern. Adrian, you had your Crown Vic past 155 miles an hour. Must be a pretty heavily modified one then. Yeah, Admiral, I'll check and see. I'll check and see what I have down there. I thought that I still had some 2-valve cams. It's cam and intake smell for power. Thanks in advance. So are you trying to make the most power? Is this a drag race thing? Or is it a street driver? And Juan, you need to take a look at the videos I have up, particularly the one where I ran I think the most powerful combination that I've put together that I've tested are the 11R heads and the 274 cam, and then I think it ran a dual plane on it, and that one made over 400. That's a pretty good combination. If you want to make more peak power, you probably could go with a single plane and more camshaft, as long as you can fit the camshaft. I don't know how much piston to valve clearance you have. I don't know if you have a stock bottom end. Otherwise, something around that 274 cam is going to kind of be where you're going to be at. And I did speak to my buddy Brian at Summit today. I inquired about some 190 11R heads and available piston to valve clearance with those heads for a Big Bang 351. So that would be cool. The hot mess, the only Hemi that I've ever made more than 1,000 horsepower with would have been the Big Bang motor. Question: I see your spark plug test, and I know you built the Cadillac 500. I was wondering what a good spark plug to use for a mild 500 build. I honestly don't know. I don't remember what plugs I even used in the Cadillac, but I'd have to look. I don't even remember what reach they were or any of that. But a factory one, my normal recommendation is a factory one, and then go 1 or 2 steps colder if it's going to see more compression and more performance use. Somebody talk to these people about that are using the word thoughts. I need a 400 standard bore, 400 block, early 70s. A 400 Pontiac or 400 small block Chevy? And a standard bore 400 small block Chevy, I think, is going to be kind of hard to find. Maybe a standard bore Pontiac would be hard to find too. Clayton, air fuel would be in the low 11s. I don't know timing on 91 on a Kenny Bell, because if it doesn't have a bypass valve on it, and it doesn't have an intercooler on it, it's not going to be able to run very much timing. Richard, have you ever tested the Crane 2030 camshaft? I have, because it's also a duplicate of one of the Ford racing cams, and we have run it back in the day. It works. 823 head, 660 spring, 629 left, 230 duration. Safe to run near 7,000 RPM. Yeah, it will run at 7,000 RPM. It's not going to be making power there, though. It's not. I mean, it's not going to be making peak power there. That 231 cam with a 6-liter LY6 made peak power with a 230 cam at 6,400, to give you an idea. It will rev to 7,000. We ran that one to 7,000, but it's just on the downside of the power. I've seen you push an LY6 to 1,500 horsepower. I guess those types of engines are used for competitions. They must require a lot of maintenance. It's a 1,500 horsepower G-Wiz motor. It's not something that you could go out and run. You may be able to run it at the drag strip. I don't know how long you could run it at 1,500 horsepower, though. Not very long. It was just to find out how much the stock motor would, the stock bottom end components would actually take. A mid-70s 454, if you have an oval port head, which is what I think that those had on them, and not a peanut port head. Peanut port heads can make 600. We're pretty certain of that. It takes a lot of work, but they can. The oval port heads can certainly make 600 horsepower. So if you want to make that much, you can do that. It just takes a lot of the rest of the motor. It takes a big cam and compression and all that stuff. So it depends on how much you want to make. But they, in ported form, they will support that much power. Will reprofiling 3/8 valve stems on a big block Inconel valve help flow? Risk versus reward, a good idea. What do you mean by reprofiling them? You're going to trim the stems down? I wouldn't do that. I'd like that information you got from Summit on the 11Rs and stock bottom end, and try to copy your build other than the intake. Well, ultimately, I'm going to have to measure piston to valve clearance, because I don't know that they've actually measured that on a 351. We're just taking a look at valve drop and how much different those would be than other heads that we might choose. Or GM performance lifters, I don't know that I've ever run them. If I'm conservative, can I pour my own hits? We don't talk about politics here. Do you see that political joke? Yeah, and you could do stuff that's definitely not going to hurt them. If you go in and smooth the bowl area out, and you smooth things out, you're not going to hurt it that much, and you really can only help it. Try to keep away from peak torque to keep the engine alive. You can only if you're trying to. Are you running boost on it? What's GW2? Oh, yeah, no, I did answer that. Richard, do you regap the rings on all your turbo builds? I didn't change the gap on yet on the two of them. On the L33, I haven't taken it apart to change the gap. We only ran 7 pounds on it. And the same thing on the 8.1. I didn't regap those. We ran them on E85. The motor is 140 degrees. We have, 65 or 70 degree ambient air, and we only run them for one pass. So I took my chance and nothing happened. And if it did, it would be on me. But I didn't do those. But on all the big bang stuff, all of the things where we're getting serious with, all of those get taken apart and we put gap on them. Ben, do you think I'll notice the difference between going to a 4-inch and 3-inch exhaust? Do you have twin 4-inch exhausts or twin 3-inch exhausts? What do you got on there? What is the exit size of the 78 millimeter turbos that you have? What is it coming out of the turbo? It's got a 5.3 and wanted to run stock ring gap on 5 or 6 pounds. Okay, try it and see what happens. That's all I can say. There's no way to tell you that yes it works or that like absolutely that it works or absolutely that it doesn't. Like I said, I did it and take full responsibility if something happens and it broke. Then I'm the guy that has to take it apart and put it back together and fix all the broken stuff in it. So I'm okay with that. What people often do on the internet, what they want is, because I get this question way too many times. Well, how much boost can I run on the stock gap? What they're looking for is you can run 10 pounds, but you can't run 11. At 10, 100% safe, never have any problems. At 11, it's going to blow up. That's what they want. That's not a real thing. There is no definitive like edge there. There's no level like that because it's not boost. It's actually ring temperature. So you could put a lot of ring temperature in it if you run 5 or 6 pounds and you're in the throttle for a long time. You could get ring temperature in it. If you're running it on pump gas and you've taken a bunch of timing away and you raise the EGTs, you can get ring temperature in there. So it's ring temperature and not boost. And so that's why you never know. That's why it's a good idea to put gap in there. Camaro, thank you very much. I'm going to rev it high and keep away from the peak torque. If it's an NA motor, you don't have to worry about keeping it away from the peak torque because it's not going to hurt itself if it's an NA motor at the peak torque. You want to run it from peak torque to peak horsepower. That's going to be the fun part. That's where it's going to accelerate really well. What do you think of adjustable Ford modular roller followers? Are they important upgrades for reliable higher PM use or just waste of money? I've heard they can crack the heads on a 2-valve or 3-valve. I don't know anything about that. I would have to ask Mahovitz. I've never run the Jessel stuff. I've never run the high RPM 2-valve. We've run 8-valve or 4-valve stuff to 8,000 without any problem. Mahovitz has run way beyond that. But we've run them to 8,000. We just run the stock stuff and just with spring, different springs on it. Richard, assuming a Street 350 will make more average power with a dual plane intake than a single plane, that's normally the case. Would you just turbo the dual plane? Yeah, I would. We've done that a lot. And it will make whatever it does NA, it will do that with boost. So a dual plane will be much more responsive. It will have more boost response and it will make more average power at any given boost level. If it does that NA, it will definitely do that under boost. Can the Big Bang 351 Windsor take E85 to an octane rating of 114? So where are we going to get E85 that's rated at 114, unless it's a race version of E85? I probably would we will be running that motor on E85. on up to some boost level. I don't think I'll do the big bang on the 85. I think I would do it on regular race gas. Peanut port heads, peanut oil, 1801, and spark plug delete. Oh, so we want to make it a diesel? Oh, you're running 16 pounds. Okay, yeah. So I see what you're doing then. The intake manifold will have a big play on that. So you could, if you put in one of these short runner manifolds, you can kill a lot of the mid-range torque on that. What lifter brand for the street use? Stage 4 LS3 cam. We run the lifters that came out of the junkyard motors. I've also run Felpro box lifters. I don't know what those are. I don't know whose those are. I don't know that I've ever run LS7 lifters. I've never run ISKI lifters on an LS because somebody said that I like ISKI lifters, and ISKI lifters on their roller stuff, like for big blocks and small blocks, are really good. Maybe some of the best ones out there, but I don't know about the LS stuff because I've never tried them. What are some good budget options for 80-pound or bigger injectors? The Decas are the only ones I know that are in the 80s. Beyond that, I don't know. I think you have to start spending injector money on them. Anyone done a 250 gear set on a 9-inch Ford? Reduce stem between the valve head and where it enters the valve guide. Yeah, I've seen what do they call? Manly Pro Flows were like that, I think. Yeah, that's that they're just right in writing. Yeah, I've seen those, but I would like to see a flow test. Maybe Eric has done a test like that, or David Vizar has done a test like that of flowing those to see where that is. See, I don't know. The thing that I don't know is I don't know if that valve all by itself does anything, because I honestly don't know what how much of a flow restriction that valve stem is. And I don't know how much cutting it back does. And I don't know if you want to change the porting in the rest of the chamber or the approach from the short turn, maybe. See, I don't know that. I'm not a head porter. So I don't know if you need to do other things for that. And I don't think that I would do that myself. Javier, thank you. $200, $254 to hit ring temperature. Most every motor that I know does. What's the fix for repairing valve guides on the L78? I don't know what he's going to do yet. I'm curious to see. 3-inch exit on each of the turbos, and then you're going out to 4-inch. Ben, I don't remember what the power output was on this thing. Is this more than 1,000 horsepower? Dual 3-inch I don't think is going to be enough for 1,000 horsepower stuff. I think you're going to see a change in power. What's the max lift you run on stock bottom end 302? The lift is really not an issue. The lift would be much more of an issue with the retainer to seal and what's going on the cylinder head. It's not a piston to valve thing. I think that's what you're getting at. The piston to valve issue is actually duration, and it's not lift. By the time you reach maximum lift, the piston's already 2 inches down the hole, so you're never going to hit it at maximum lift. You're going to hit it at the important areas are plus and minus near 10 degrees before and after top dead center for piston to valve clearance. Yeah, who's ever putting the 250 gears in their car? What are you doing? Or is it a Bonneville thing or something? E85 race fuel from Ignite. We have used that fuel before. I think that the guys at West Tech had some of that, and I've run other E85 race fuel where they mix the E85, where the fuel portion of the E85 is race gas, so it's higher octane, and that would work. I kind of would like to try that. I'm leery. Richard, have you run Summit brand LS roller cam and run a Summit brand LS roller cam and a small block Chevy? How are you going to run an LS roller cam in a small block Chevy? The cam size is completely different, right? Aren't the cam tunnels different? Isn't everything different about that? The firing order, everything? Camaro does not need to run one of the cross ram intakes. He wants to make less low speed power, not more. That's what a lot of people don't understand, why I ended up going 8 thousandths per inch of bore in a G10 build. Yeah, that's a small bore too, right? So I think I would feel better about going more per inch of bore on a smaller bore size. And if you're going to be running under boost for a long time, that's the thing. That's like Bonneville. The Bonneville motor's got a lot of ring gap. Both the well, all of them did. The Honda did, the VW did, the Suzuki did. A 250 a gallon for pump E85 today. Nice. See, that's good. That's good race fuel. Javier. Hob. Would a comp 235, 255 respond well with boost from an 88 single turbo on an LS? Yes, it's still way bigger than you need. You don't need that big of a turbo to make 1,000 horsepower if that's what you're trying to do. On an 88 millimeter turbo, that's more like a 1,500 horsepower turbo. An 863 head's kind of the orphan child of the LS heads run on our car. What is the CFM of a typical stock set? I've never flow tested 863 heads, but if they're any, I think that's a 5.7 LS1 head. And if they are, if it's anything like a 241, they will flow a little bit more than a 706 head, but less than a 799 head. But they made less power than the 706 head did. Don't be scared of the fuel. Every time we run the Big Bang motor, we've run it on 118 octane fuel. So we knew we weren't going to hurt it. But the E85 is going to make more power. How much ring gap for Bonneville? I think we had, let's see, we had a, it was an 84. See, I think we had, I think we were nudging up on 30 thousandths on a 84 millimeter bore. I think it was between 28 and 30 thousandths. He's saying LS cam from a Summit in a small block Chevy because Summit calls their cams Pro LS cams. Oh, okay. They call all their cams Pro LS cams. I know that the box that I got some of mine in were called that the Ford ones, if that's what they're referring to. You have to spell it out because otherwise I'll get lost. Is head temperature directly related to ring temperature? I think that they're probably correlated, but that's not a causal thing. Ring temperature could be something different. Richard Summit had some small Chevy roller cams ground to the LS firing order. It's a 4.7 and a 2.3 swap in a single cam. They have 6 stages of cams. I don't know why they would do that. Don't know why they would do that. The puppies are doing awesome. We took them out. Lisa and I took them out out on the trails today, and I ran up one of the hills with them, and they basically pulled me up the hill. Especially there's one dominant male, Bruno, and he's a sled dog. He wants to go get stuff. How much are Cobra R heads and intakes worth? I might buy them for my boss 260 as they're quite cheap. The modular stuff, you should buy those. Just that's like super cool. Not so much the Cobra R heads, but they are cool. But the Cobra R intake is definitely cool. Because it's Cobra R stuff. Did I never have I never had a poll here, right? I talked to Brian Tooley today. I'm trying to talk him into coming to Florida with me to hike out in the swamps and catch pythons. He's like, you want to do what? But he's a gamer, though. I like Brian. That's why I like Brian. So is boost. Here's our poll. Is boost always the answer? 2,000 RPM at 8 miles an hour with a 472 Cadillac. There you go. Intake is like a big Boss 260. I've seen the Cobra R stuff. It's neat. Richard, less torsional stress, revs. How does it rev faster? So explain that to me. Less wear and tear on the bearings. I mean, I know that the LS firing order, that they did it for, I don't know, second or third order vibrations or whatever they were doing for NVH stuff, and they're doing it for longevity. But I don't think that the cam, I don't know. I think that'd be a hard thing to prove. They say the difference in fire order makes more power. Some of the theory that Windsor firing order makes more power than the regular 302 firing order. I would love to test that. I think that's not going to do anything. We've run a 4.7 swap Chevy thing, and it didn't do anything. It didn't change the power at all. I'd go with you hog and gator hunting. I'm not doing either one of those. I'm just going to catch the pythons. But gator hunting to me doesn't seem very sporting. Hog hunting, though, that would be, especially invasive species, would be good. Now, if a guy's gator hunting and he does, do it pirate style, where you put the knife in your mouth and you swim out in the water and then you go one-on-one. But shooting a gator from a boat that's not very sporting. Was your favorite brand of socket set? I have Pittsburgh stuff. I also have some old Craftsman stuff in my box I have in my storage, but I have lots of Pittsburgh stuff. In fact, I bought Pittsburgh stuff for working at West Tech, and all my Pittsburgh stuff is still there. It's not mine; it's theirs because I gave it to them, but it's all still there. It doesn't get lost. That's my hob. It's my hob to test it. The Windsor firing order may take some stress out of the block. I would like to test the Windsor thing. I'd like to test. I know that the guys from Summit would give me a cam to test, but the problem is I would need two cams. I would need the exact specs on the cams. I need the cams to be identical, not just lift and duration stuff, but the lobes have to be identical. They would just have to be a different firing order. I just saw a video of an Aussie guy smack a big crocodile with a frying pan to get it out of his yard. I love the ones where the guys run off of the bank, and there's a alligator or crocodile or whatever sitting in the pond, and they run and jump and they jump on top of it and they get it. That's awesome. That's kind of crazy stuff. Um, and I love the things in Australia where they're just shooing the crocodile out, because honestly, it's not, where they get you is when you're walking next to the edge of the water, because they're submerged, they're waiting to attack something. That's their deal. That's what they do. That's how they live. They attack things that go up to get a drink of water, and they surprise them and drag them underwater and drown them and stuff them under a log or something and eat them. But if you see them out, mostly people just shoo them away, like on golf courses and stuff like that. Try catching iguanas. I had pet iguanas when I was younger, but I've watched a lot of the videos of the cowboy guy using the air rifles to, again, the iguanas have kind of overrun Florida because it's a very, very good habitat for them, and so they have to go around trying to get rid of them, just like they do with the snakes. Yeah, tree shakers and branch breakers. That's right. That's like snipe hunting. You got bush beaters, and you got the bag holder, and you got bush beaters. They're different. Everybody has their job. You want to see the YouTube video of the guy in Texas with a minigun mounted on his truck for pig hunting? That's pretty. I like the pig hunting. Obviously, that's most effective is when they do the feed in the cages, and they spring the cages on them. It's amazing to watch the pigs just go nuts. I remember taking my son up to my family had a ranch, and we rode the motorcycle up in the hills, because I go up there and look for snakes and stuff. And the farmers had trapped one of the wild pigs up there. It was big, and it was in the cage. And we walk up to it. I said, "No, I said, look, if this pig goes nuts and it wants to get out of this cage and it finds its way out," I said, "we need to climb a tree." I said, "because this would be bad things. I mean, I'll do what I can to protect you." I said, "but you need to climb a tree. You don't run, don't try to hide, don't stand there. You need to go up a tree." I said, "because these are bad." And so we walked up because we wanted to look at it, and it was asleep. And then when it woke up, it was not happy. And I said, "See," I said, "it's in a cage. That's okay." I said, "but if it's not, they can get kind of aggressive." "31% saying boost is not the answer." Wow. I know, where they jump off the boat. I've seen guys do that to sharks too, which is interesting. I don't know if it's a variable solenoid. Variable solenoid for what? One more minute and we're going to get rid of our poll. 69 and 31. 69 is still a win. Ooh, tannerite feed boxes. Yeah, that would definitely make for good video. Then that's just like pre-made bacon, right? Cords. Cordus. B-dub. I don't know why I keep wanting to call it cords. See how Levi, you're wearing cords. I know, not good. The car farm guys just sent me a photo of the Omni just out in the field with the sky in the background stuff. Alligators are just spicy dogs in Florida. Yeah, I mean, the way people react to things, we see that here, just the way people react to dogs. I mean, when we're walking our dogs, they're two puppy golden retrievers. And then Milo, who, he's 13. He's not going to really get aggressive. He may walk up and kiss you or take a nap or something. But the way people react about everything, spiders, or they see a snake and they like throw a hissy fit. I'm like, look, it's 10 feet away from you. It's not going to do anything. In fact, it's just going to want to go get away. It's probably just sitting out in the sun, just chilling, just relaxing. Why do you care about that? Same thing with, gators and all the things. Oh, you have a German short hair pointer? Those are cool. Should I buy Tesla stock this week? Tesla, what did Tesla do today? I did pretty good on Tesla today. Tesla started at 163, went down to 159, back up to 163, ended at 161. So it was moving around enough. Stock 460 deserves boost or nitrous. Yeah, they all do. Okay, guys, I gotta get going. More videos coming up tomorrow. More live feeds. It's all good stuff. It's a weekday. So it's a work week. Thank you guys all for showing up. I'll see you all tomorrow. Click. Click.